Hello, this is Dan Humberg with HarvestFires.com. This video is going to show you the tin assembly for the Firestop enclosure on a Case model 9240 combine or 9250 combine. I believe that they left the exhaust system alone between the 9240 and 9250, so this kit should be common to both. What you're looking at is the CAD model, the computer-aided design model for the tin pieces that go assemble to enclose the exhaust manifold, the turbocharger, and the exhaust system all the way up to the diesel oxidation catalyst on that combine. I'm going to step through it just to delineate the different parts that we have there and to probably give you some pointers with regard to which parts might be problematic to install or at least challenging to install. They all can be installed, but and to review a few things about the kit. It's probably one way to visualize all of the pieces and the individual pieces, in addition to looking at the video where I fold the actual pieces of tin and show you the assembly on the bench, whichever is more useful for you. But I would suggest maybe watching this. It's a little bit shorter before you start to bend and assemble your tin on the bench. So let's start with the tin for the 9240 and 9250. Each piece has a slightly different color so that in the model so that you can see where one piece starts and another stops. If we roll this down so that we're looking on top of it, I'll try and get it so it's oriented the way that you would typically see it. Well, eventually I'll get it to that orientation. About like that. The engine, you'd be looking down on the top of the engine here, the valve cover up here, and your exhaust manifold is on the side of the engine, and this piece will then close the exhaust manifold from one end to the other right back here. The exhaust turbine from the turbocharger is right in this part area right here, sticks out from the manifold, and there's the hole here looking into the enclosure where our air will enter and blow onto that exhaust turbine. The compressor turbine is on the outside of the box right here, and the bearing that joins the compressor and the exhaust turbine runs right through the center here, and we split the kit right at that bearing. The air leaving or the gases leaving the exhaust turbine run inside a kind of an automatic choke assembly here that controls temperature reaching the next component, and then that gas turns up through a 90-degree fitting and comes up at a slope up here into the diesel exhaust catalyst. It looks like a muffler. It's stainless steel, looks like a big muffler, but it's actually the diesel exhaust catalyst on this system. You'll notice if I zoom in on this assembly that there are a lot of fingers cut on this piece that comes up to that, and those are there so that you can bend those fingers open a little bit and spring load this part against the diesel exhaust catalyst can up there, because we want it to kind of fit tight up against that, and yet it was hard to tell exactly the length that these would be to come up tight against that, and so we make them a little bit longer than we need to, but you can bend these fingers open to fit up against that circular can when the time gets, or cylindrical can when the time is right. So let's go through the pieces of this kit quickly, and maybe a little bit about each one of them. I'm going to start at the left end here of the left end of the exhaust manifold, this gray piece here. That is probably the first piece you're going to install. It's kind of the end cap around the exhaust manifold. There are several tabs on it, as you can see, that are bent to fit around other parts, and so it can be joined to others. The next piece is this piece here, lighter blue piece, that joins to that end cap. You might actually be able to put those two in place as an assembly. I don't know that for sure. I don't remember that for sure, but they screw together here, 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 and I think there's one on the end here, that little tab that overlaps. The third piece is this darker blue piece. All of these are relatively small, and that's because this environment here is really tight, and it's very difficult to get a larger piece in there, so we just do it with smaller pieces. These tabs underneath, some of them are going to be bent down the way they're shown, others you're going to bend or leave flat, and they will extend over the top of a casting boss there, and so the components can rest on that casting boss, and others will butt up against it to kind of locate it. So we have those first three pieces that cover the left end of the manifold. And then the next piece would be this chunk here that's going to join on to that assembly. So it's the top piece of the wall that divides the compressor from the exhaust turbine, and it'll go right over the top of the exhaust or the turbocharger bearing. Might actually fit in a little bit of a kind of a slot in that housing for that bearing. So that'll screw on here. You should be able to reach at least two of these holes. Maybe difficult to get this one down here because the turbine is in the way here, but you can get a couple of those to hold that piece on. The lower part of this wall, the gray one, will slide up from underneath around here. And then there are two holes here and two holes here. You may or may not be able to get to all of them, but the screws are probably going to go from right to left, from the inside to the outside here. We did several different versions or offered several hole options because you can't always reach each one, and some of them may run into the compressor turbine here, and we don't want to interfere with that in any way, but at least one here and one here to hold that piece on and in place. Once you have that wall that that wall that separates the compressor from the exhaust turbine, then we can try and fit this chunk in, this gray piece here, that will slide back in underneath the exhaust turbine. It's probably the most difficult piece on the kit to get in place. And all I can tell you is that it will go in there. It's kind of a Chinese puzzle. You have to find the magic combination of twists and turns that allow it to slide up into place there. Generally, it's going to go up in from underneath at one angle or another and rotate up in place and slide in. What I'll point out here is that there is an opening for the pressure line that supplies pressurized oil to the turbocharger bearing, and that will go, let's see if I can orient this correctly. Roll it around here enough. That's closer. Here we go. Now we're looking kind of from the end, and that oil line is going to come up from behind here and angle up through that hole. What I've done in the design is left a whole bunch of little slits in this piece. So there's all these little fingers of steel, of galvanized steel, and you can bend these open by hand to make that opening accommodate that pressure line. This tab also can be bent straight or out of the way temporarily, and when you get the piece in there, you can fold that up to kind of fill in the hole around that pipe as it goes through there, that tube. We don't really want contact with that tube. You want to have some clearance all around, and so I typically bend these fingers so that they are parallel to that pressure line, but not tight up against it, so you get a little bit of clearance around there. You can actually fill in around this hole if you need to with a little of that aluminum foil tape when the time comes to tighten up the hole a little bit, but I don't want anything vibrating against that line because I'd never want anything to cut that line, because then you'd lose your engine oil through that line, and that would be problematic for the machine. So that piece, if you can fit it in there, you may have to put it in and out a couple times to get these bends. That's one of the reasons I made all these fingers, is you might be able to adjust them once it's in place a little bit, but you might also have to put it in place and take it out a couple times in order to get those adjusted correctly. It'd be nice if it would go in one place once and stay there, because it's so hard to get in place. But that piece will go up in behind there, and once it's in there, there's a hole here. You should be able to screw through. This one is designed to go through from the back side towards the front side. You'd have to reach behind with that little tiny screwdriver that's provided in the kit and try and put it in from the back. This one also is meant to go in from the back. If you can get either one or both of them, that helps. So, and then there are these two holes that go with the same up underneath from below, and you have to reach in from the right hand end. It's a tough deal to reach in there and fit. You need somebody with relatively small arms and hands, and get these screws through this tab from the previous piece up into this gray one. That's, once you have it in place, it will lock it in there. So you try to get at least one screw through here, and then one of these other ones through the back side to hold that together. So that's probably, if you get that piece on, it's all downhill from there, from my experience with this install. After you have that one, You can go to this lighter blue piece. It's kind of the bottom pan under the turbo. It goes in place relatively easily, screws through from some of these from the bottom up. Others from the can also go in from the, I look in here, look through that hole, I can look and tell that those are, no, I think they're meant to come in from the back side. The smaller hole is what's visible here, and so they're meant to come from the back side. So if we rotate around, we would see that yes, those are larger holes, pilots on the bottom. We hope you can come from underneath and catch one or more of those. You don't necessarily have to get every screw hole, but we'd like to have a lot of screws to hold this tightly together. That bottom piece also has the oil or the cutout here for the oil return line. This is the low pressure line that drains oil away from the turbocharger bearing. And it has a bunch of littler fingers. And you can bend those open. I would typically bend them down so that they're parallel to the oil line coming through here and don't contact it, but are smooth faces. If they were to rub up against it, it would be the smooth face of the tab and not the edge of the tab. These tabs aren't necessarily sharp, but they're hard and rough where the laser cut them. So we don't want those sharp edges or those hard edges rubbing on that line. So bend these tabs just a little bit, 90 degrees, so that they clear that oil line. And if you need to, you can trim here and open this up if necessary, but hopefully we've got it in the right spot so that you can bend tabs open and make it fit with a little clearance around that oil return line. Then there are screw holes here and over along here to screw it up to the bottom, and that one will go in place. The next piece is this blue piece that I can highlight here that will slide in. It'll slide in on top of the bottom and in up against this angled piece in the back. It'll slide in place if you've bent it correctly. And there are screw holes underneath to go with screws up from the bottom. And there are some screws that will go down. Let's see if I can get that in your field of view through here and here from the top down to hold it together. That requires a long screwdriver to reach down there and get those, but they will go through from the top side down. So that's that piece. Once you have that one in, we can come around here to the back, and there's a long piece here. This long piece will go underneath the exhaust manifold from this gray one. It'll overlap and sit on top of the gray one. We want them to sit on top so the air coming blasting underneath here slips over the top of those tabs and doesn't shove dust in underneath any one of them. So we got two holes here. You have to reach underneath and put screws in from the bottom up. That can be kind of a tight fit, but two screws will hold that in place, and it will sit in the spot where it's meant to be. Some of these tabs that you show, they're all shown bent down here because that's the way the computer model generates a tab, but some of them won't be bent and others will be bent down, and some of them will rest on top of a boss that sits there and others butt up against it, and it'll help hold that piece in place. Once you have that one in, then we can do this chunk here that's highlighted with the yellow boundary here now. It'll slip in place and it'll fit over the tab of this previous one. There's 3 screw holes there. You can reach from out here. It's hard to show them. You can look down through here perhaps. There are screw holes here. There are screws on the left end of that same piece. I don't know how to find that. I guess I can look down through here. There, I can catch them there. Through screw holes through there that'll catch the tab on the previous piece. And then there are screw holes on the top. And this will all be open here at this point, so it's not too hard to reach this piece. Screw holes that go there and there, and to tie that one in. That'll be clear when you get to that point, I think. Let's roll around to the back again. Once that piece is in place, this blue, dark blue one here can go in next. That'll overlap the tab on the previous one. It'll also overlap this long one under the manifold, and you can screw that one in place. Screws will go down from the top here and in from the front on this side. So there they are. You can see them. These go down from the top, and then these 3 go in from the front. After you have that, we're all the way under the manifolds all covered up. We can put this piece, this gray piece, bottom tray. It'll slide in from the front. It'll straddle these. There's some posts here that go between the exhaust pipe and the control block that's below it. So it'll straddle that and go in between there and overlap the in the back here. Looks to me like right now it's designed so that right here it shows the screws going down from or coming up from the bottom, and I think my intention is actually that you put those screws in from the top down, and I think you'll find that they're set up that way so that this tab that's shown here should overlap on top of, it's shown underneath, but it should flip over and go on top of this back piece. Similarly, this I think should be on top of this piece here when you slide it in place, and the holes are such that you'd shoot through from the top and go down, because that's easier to reach than going from the bottom up here. It isn't shown that way, but you can slip it in that way so that the screws go down from on top. Okay, that'll fill in the whole bottom piece, and we can actually come to the end here now. There we go. We're looking kind of looking at the end of the manifold, exhaust manifold would be here. I'll see if I can rotate that. There we go. So the exhaust manifold is right inside here. The turbo's out there, and this is the end cap, I guess, or the end assembly. There are several pieces here. There's this piece that will probably slip in from the top down, and it will have tabs that overlap right here, and it'll have some that wrap under from the side probably here, and it's got a tab that the top piece will fit to. So you get that one in place and a couple screws to hold it in there, and it should slip down inside the tab on the end of this bottom piece that we already got in here. So it'll slip inside that, and it shows 3 screw holes here. I hope that you can reach those 3. There's a whole bunch of junk outside here that's hard, that really gets in the way, and so it may be difficult to hit those screw holes. If I've changed anything in this design, it would be that I'd put screws from the bottom up, but I don't think I have yet. I think they're still from this end. So if you can't get them all in there, that's okay, but try to get as many as you can reach to hold that end piece in place. Once you have that one in place, you can do this kind of orange chunk. Again, it won't be orange, of course, but once it's bent into place, you can slip it up from the bottom. It will overlap the end here and slap up against the bottom tray here. And you've got screws that you can go. The bottom ones are easy to reach. These here, some of them you can reach and some of them you probably can't. There's a bunch of brackets and stuff that are outside here, and the gap is really tight in here, and it's hard to get a screwdriver in there to reach. But if you can get 2 or 3 of them, that'll hold that together. Also, that piece will wrap around here. The next piece that we would put in place is this dark blue front panel here. It has lots of screw holes all along this wall, along the bottom here, and that one isn't terribly difficult to get in place. It'll screw on here, and you start probably here, somewhere here, and it will, the more screws you put in, the next ones just line up because it pulls all of those computer generated screw holes in place. So you get those all in place. You'll have to slip it behind the orange piece or put the blue one on first and then put the orange one on after that, and then this tab will overlap and you can screw these together here. Now this piece that I'm pointing at right here is a fill block. There is a sensor line that comes out from this, and they move it around, it seems, at different assemblies of this machine, so I can't guarantee you it always come out one spot, or I'd have just the right hole cut for it. But you can bring that sensor line through or wrap this orange piece around it, and then you can cut this piece as necessary to fit reasonably closely around that sensor line. It may be that it comes out like right here. That's probably the most likely space, and you may end up actually cutting away some of these screw holes. But the idea is to tighten up the space around that sensor line. You can also fill in with some of the aluminum tape around there in order to tighten up that space so we don't lose too much air there. But this piece will slip in after you put the orange piece on, and will allow you to tighten up that space around that sensor. Once you have that one on, it's time to put this giant top chunk on. That piece will slip in from the top right, from back in this direction, and slip in there. And once you get it down on top of here, you can start screwing it on from the top down. I usually start probably like right here and right here, and the farther you work around, it'll pull everything else into line. Similarly, the farther you work around here, it will pull the next piece into line. You can go screw hole by screw hole and run your screws all the way in around that from one end to the other. It's hard to go to the end and do it, but you could start out here and follow them, and it'll do that. It'll help you along the way. Down here, there's a filler piece again. There's a hole underneath it, and there's a pneumatic actuator line that comes out of this side panel here. You actually have to, there's a quick clamp on that you can undo with a pliers and bring that line, take it off, and I probably have to do that when you put this panel on, but then you can slip that line through there and put it back on, and you can fit this little circular piece on and make these open these fingers up here so that it fits relatively close around that sensor line, but doesn't butt tightly up against it. You don't want to abrade that rubber line, but we want to get close to it so that we don't let a lot of air in around that thing, because the blast from the radiator is poking right at this, and I don't want it pushing dust in around that fitting. So that's what that's for. The last piece to go in place on here is this light blue piece right here. It's not real difficult to put on. You get it bent correctly and start putting screws here and here and wrapping around here, and it'll pull the rest of it into place. But you could probably screw it down first to this top blue piece, and then there'll be a couple screw holes. If they don't, I don't know if they're going to show here or not. Don't see them right now. If they don't line up, or if there aren't holes there, you can shoot holes through these two to pull them together, because those are self-drilling screws that you're given for the kit. On the outer side of it here, there should be a series of holes that would line up, and this one will tie it to the end, and this will tie it, these holes would tie it to this outer piece. You may not again be able to get all of these, but you should be able to get one or two of them to get it to pull together. Again, you got fingers here that you'll have to bend outward in order to allow this to fit up tight against the diesel exhaust catalyst can. You may even have to cut these slots down farther than I did here. It depends on whether I've got the spacing right here. But if it's too tight, you can always extend these slots down with a tin snips so that you can bend these fingers out. Theoretically, you could bend them in too, but my inclination would be to bend them out and let them so that they push up against the diesel exhaust catalyst can and kind of seal up against it. They can just friction fit up against it. You don't have to connect them to it, but that'll help seal that up so that we don't lose a lot of air up around that and allow any dust to get in, because the components inside here run very hot, and that diesel exhaust catalyst is still pretty hot too. Let's see if I missed anything here. Oh, there may be a piece with your kit. There's probably a piece that will fit over the top of this hole. On the early 9240s, there was some kind of sensor line or oil line or something that came out here and dove down and screwed into the exhaust manifold, and I had to cut the piece open to fit it around that piece. So in the next design, we cut an opening for it so you can fit it around that. But then the more recent 9240s don't show that. They moved that pipe piece, so this may be an unused feature. If it is, there should be a cap or a filler block to go over the top of it, and probably screw on here and here, and then you can shoot a couple screws through there to hold it on tight to cover that hole up. So it's there in case you need it if you have an earlier model 9240, but if you've got a later 9240 or 9250, that probably won't be needed. This is the hole, the 4-inch hole where the air is going to come into the box or enclosure. It's going to blow right onto the turbocharger. You have an HVAC or heating, ventilation, air conditioning piece that will make the transition from this into a 4-inch tube system that we can get back to the to our blower and filter. So the piece slips in here. It's got fingers, some of which you slip through and bend out from the inside, a few that you bend out on the outside and shoot some screws through to hold that on. And then there's a on the 9240, we'll go straight onto that piece with a rubber 90 that will go over this direction, and then we make a 90 and shoot out over the top step to get out to the next piece of the air system fitting. So anyway, that's a review of the assembly of the tin for a case 9240 or 9250 Firestop kit. Now, I'll look down through here, you see this opening down in the bottom. That's because there's a strong or a heavy bracket that comes up through here that supports the right end of the exhaust pipe. Comes up and bolts to the casting. And it's designed to have little flanges here that you can adjust, bend down, so that, let's see if we can swing around underneath and look at that. There it is from the bottom. You can see those tabs. I have them bent down here, and you can bend them that way. So the idea is that they fit fairly closely up against that bracket, but they're adjustable now. You can bend them open more if you need to, or bend one in and the other up open to fit closely around that bracket so that we don't lose a lot of air around that component as an opening. It doesn't matter if we lose some there, but we don't want to lose too much. But they'll slip in around that, and then you can adjust the opening by bending those tabs closed or open as necessary to allow the component of the piece to fit around there and somewhat tight. Also, there's a potential for a tube that has to go in through this area here. Again, you can bend these fingers open or closed to allow that to go through with the least amount of open gaps. So that's the tin kit for a 9240, 9250. I always tell everybody, I hope it goes on smoothly for you, but I also warn everybody, while this Firestop kit will greatly reduce the number of smolders you have in a combine in a volatile crop like sunflowers, I can't guarantee you'll never have a fire on the combine. You could still have a spark thrown from your alternator if it wears out, a hot bearing that can start a fire, an electrical short somewhere that can start a fire, or even a place where there's friction generator or something wraps around a shaft or pulley and causes enough friction to start a fire. But you'll probably find that with this kit on, your combine acts more like it's combining wheat than if it's combining sunflowers or canola or safflower or something with volatile dust. So good luck with your kit. If you have questions or comments, don't hesitate to contact me at harvestfires.com. Actually, harvestfires@outlook.com is the email address, but you can also, there's a form at the bottom of the website that you can use to send me an email if you have a question or comment about the kit. Thanks very much. Good luck with your harvest and your kit.